Are you ready to accelerate the growth of your business? Welcome to the Revenue Growth Podcast. This is the place for business owners, sales leaders, and marketing professionals to get ideas and inspiration to drive exponential revenue growth. Each week, you'll get actionable insights from the world's leading marketing and sales thought leaders and practitioners. Are you ready to grow? Let's join our host, Daryl Amy, author of Revenue Growth Engine.
Welcome back to the Revenue Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Daryl Amy, trailblazer and growth architect. And today we're going to talk about how to create engaging content based on research with over 1 million people. You're going to get practical ideas to enhance your content and your engagement with clients and prospects in our conversation with Ben Worthen, founder of Message Lab. I can't wait to introduce him. It's going to be a fantastic conversation today. Huge thanks to this episode's sponsor, Selling from the Heart, and the 2022 Authentic Selling Challenge. If you've got a sales team and want to get the year off to an incredible start, make sure to enroll yourself and your reps in the challenge. It's running every day. It's already in motion this week, January 17th through 21st, from 12 to 1 Eastern. And we're going to be coached by incredible leaders like Jeffrey and Jennifer Gittimer, Heather Monahan, Carson Heddy, Morgan Ingram, and more. Oh, Scott Schilling, Revenue Growth Podcast alumni himself. Look, you don't want to miss this. And even if you are not able to come live, all of it's being recorded. You can register for free at www.AuthenticSellingChallenge.com. That's AuthenticSellingChallenge.com. You can get your tickets now. Well, our guest today is Ben Worthen. And I'm excited to welcome Ben to the studio. He is the CEO of Message Lab, an award-winning agency that combines journalism, data, and design to craft and content and create experiences that get real results. Ben, welcome to the Revenue Growth Podcast. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
You've had quite an interesting journey to get to this point, working with Wall Street Journal, over 50 page one stories, clients along the way, including Facebook, Google, GoDaddy, just a who's who list of companies. And along the way, you've been able to do some in-depth research into how people engage with content. And I know right now, all of our listeners, whether you're listening in as a CEO, an entrepreneur, a sales leader, a marketing leader, everyone's sitting here going, okay, how do I get more people to engage with my content? I'm curious, how did this research come about? 1 million people, that's a substantial amount of research. What's the backstory behind this?
Yeah, it's a great question. The backstory is that in addition to creating content for our clients, one of the core ideas that we have is it has to work. No one wants to fund art projects. And so we, as creative people who want to do cool storytelling, I'm a former newspaper reporter. I love nothing more than a good story, but doing it for clients when there's a different kind of incentive. It's not just getting someone to read, but it's getting someone to read and then take some other kind of action that leads towards a sale. We do our job well and better, provide more value when we're able to help our clients understand the relationship between someone engaging with an idea and all the way through to the point in time where they become a customer or they become a better customer. So one of the things we've always done from the beginning is use data that we can put on our clients' websites where we're taking a look at not just how people are engaging with the content that we're making, but then what else are they doing? And following from the point in which we first capture someone's attention with an idea all the way through. And, we've been at this for about 4 years now as Message Lab, and we've written thousands of pieces of content for our clients, like many thousands of pieces. And we have watched and observed really closely through all kinds of little, specific data points that we try to capture what happens. And you add it up, and we probably have a bank of, millions with an S of people's, consumption habits that we've seen across a whole bunch of clients. And from there, one of the things that I think is pretty cool is that it turns out people are people and people are readers, and it doesn't really matter if you're selling widgets or software or social networking. People's behavior when it comes to engaging with content is kind of the same always.
That's fascinating. What an incredible well of ideas and insight to draw upon. A lot of times I think business owners look at content and go, "Man, we're pouring all this money into content. We're putting all this stuff out there. Why aren't more people engaging with it? Why aren't more people reading it?" What are some of the top things you learned as you start to look into that data?
Yeah, so it's a big question. And in order to answer it, you have to look at a lot of different aspects of it.
Hmm.
For us, there's a handful of things that we would say that are each pieces that we would look at. So on the content creation standpoint, one question is, are you making the right things? Meaning,
Mm,
we believe strongly that you don't want to be advertising. If you're going to do content marketing well, which we consider, engaging people around ideas that are interesting for them, are you leading with something that is interesting for them? And to go into a sales
mm.
metaphor, there's the hard sell, right? Where you're saying, "Hey, Daryl, buy our product, buy our product, buy our product." And if I don't want the product, yeah, I don't want to be a
Bye
participant in the
bye. Yeah.
conversation. Right, exactly.
Right.
And then there's the mode of like, well, how can I help? What are the problems that you have? What are the things that you care about mode? And and just generally speaking, more people are going to want to hear about ideas that are valuable to them. People
Hmm.
want to hear your thoughts and your point of view on a problem that they're experienced, regardless of whether or not it features your product or not. So, are you approaching your storytelling from the right place? Do you have the "why does somebody care" box
Hmm.
checked next to it? And then are you just, from a tradecraft standpoint, telling that story well? That's part one. Um, Part two is, like the internet content, like, the internet doesn't really need more content. It's kind of loaded to the gills with
It's
content,
doing all
you
right
know?
with content,
Yes,
right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like if you think about the universe of
Not
problems we all have
starving
to
to
solve,
death.
right? Exactly. More content for the internet is not one of them. And
Hmm.
and so, if you just, write a blog post, for instance, and stick it on the web, it's your tree falling in the woods.
Hmm.
So what can you do to make sure that it's not a tree falling in the woods? You have to have a plan, you have to have a strategy, you have to have
Hmm.
steps that you're taking in order to make sure that the people who you want to reach see the thing that you're making,
Hmm.
and have a way of getting to it. So
Hmm.
that's another thing that you have to take into account. And then the third thing that we'd say you have to take into account is what kind of experience are you creating for them.
Hmm.
And that's a really interesting one that I think a lot of our data shows that people aren't really thinking about, as deeply as they should. And just to set the table for more of a conversation around it, things like the user experience, things like the calls to action that you choose to put in there and where you put them in, things like the load time of your website. Things like, are
Hmm.
you using subheads and images and things like that to
Hmm.
to help people scroll and guide them through? Have a huge influence on whether or not someone is going to stay on this piece of content they landed on, or whether they're going to go and find one of the gajillion other pieces of content out there on the internet.
I think that's a really great perspective. We talk a lot about customer experience on the podcast and in Revenue Growth Engine. It's an anchor for all of this, and taking that mentality and then applying it to what's in your digital marketing specifically in something like a blog post. I mean, we can
Mhm.
all think of times we've gone to an article that seemed interesting, and then you click on it, and it's like this block of
Yeah,
dense text that
the
nobody.
impenetrable wall of
Right.
text. It,
A
it could be it could be
PhD,
the yes,
yeah, could never even make sense of it, right? It's like one of those
yeah.
things from the 16th century. And, and then as opposed to going to something that is laid out maybe more like a newspaper article, or I was thinking about, I was reading a great article on the Harvard Business Review, HBR website this morning. It was actually interesting because while I was reading that, I was thinking about how easy this is to read, right?
Mhm.
Someone put some thought into the readability, the layout, how it all flowed, so that I actually made it to the end of that article and got a lot out of it. I ended up
Yeah.
sharing some stuff from it on my social feed and with a couple of people in our company. And had that article been written or presented to me in a way that was dense, small font, no, hard to read, I probably wouldn't have consumed it.
Yeah. So one of the things that we see with our data is one of the things we try to measure is how much time someone spends
Hmm.
on a page, and we get really granular and really detailed about how we measure
Hmm.
time, because at the end of the day, we think that we aren't actually trying to sell you something. We're trying to be part of a sales process, but we don't
Hmm.
want the content that we write for our clients to be the thing that's selling, right? We don't want to necessarily have a buy now button on the bottom of the page and judge our success or failure based on other people did that. We want to know, did you get value out of the piece of content? And for us, time is the best approximation of it. One of the things that we see is that different amounts of time on an article are correlated with different kinds of mindsets, different kind of actions that someone might take. So, I don't know whether you've had this experience, but as content creators, we have this kind of experience all the time where we're working with a client on an article. And let's just say that it's a op-ed from their CEO. And when we work with big publicly traded companies on op-eds for their CEOs, and if you stop and think for a moment about how much time and effort and how that might translate into dollars, what the like time and effort cost is of that kind of
Yeah.
article. You've got our team going off and working on something, and we share it with the PR team, and they give us feedback, and we go off and rewrite it, and then they give it to the CEO's chief of staff, and that chief of staff reads it and gives feedback, and then the CEO might spend a couple of hours with it, and then the lawyers have to look, and you add it up, and if there was like a taxi meter that was
Hmm.
rolling for this article, it's preposterous, right? And
Right.
then what happens is someone goes, and without really thinking much about it, they stick it on this experience, like the wall of text that you were thinking about earlier.
Right. Like some of the PR
Yeah.
sites, even, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some of them are
And
atrocious.
and what we see across all of our clients is that on average, about half of people are going to leave a website, a piece of content, before they reach the 15-second mark. And the 15-second mark is a useful proxy because, like, you can do a lot of things in 15 seconds, but like one thing you cannot do is actually read anything. And if you ever there's like you seem like a sane, rational, normal human being, so you probably have not stood there with a stopwatch timing yourself reading articles. But it's the sort of thing that
Mhm.
we do all the time. And if you ever tried it, what you'd find is like seconds 1, 2, 3, you're waiting for the page to load, right?
Right. Yeah.
4 and 5 is like, where am I? Am I where I expected to be or not? Then you're sort of thinking about, is this a good experience or a bad experience? And again, you see 1,000 dense words of text, and you're gone. It might be the best idea anyone's ever published, but you're not going to engage with it.
Right.
So, it really takes about 15 seconds to acquaint yourself with the headline, to figure out where you are, maybe to scroll a little bit and see what's there before, as a human, you begin to read. And again, what we see is that half of people will make a decision to stay or go, not based on the words that you and the CEO or the chief of staff and the lawyers have just labored over, but based on all these other elements, and it's controllable, by the way. The
Hmm.
better and the more you focus on making that top experience, that sort of instinctive, visually led experience, better, and the more time you spend on it, you can get that stat up to 65, 70, 75% even. And if you have an atrocious website, you can get it down to 15 or 20%, um, but it's one of those areas that we strongly believe people aren't spending enough time and energy thinking about.
Mm.
You labor over the blog post itself, but the experience that you're creating for someone who wants to engage with it, you're not. People. There's just so much more that people could do there, and it would
Yeah.
have outsized dividends compared to almost any other investment that they could make.
Very, very interesting. I think that is a fantastic perspective. And what are like the top two or three signs of a horrible layout? Like what are some things if you see on your website you should go directly, to
Do
your,
not pass go,
yeah,
go
right. Like,
directly
get
to
this fixed
designer.
now. Like, what are the things that are going to yield that 15% engagement?
I'll tell you, it's, I mean, I'm going to equivocate a little bit on the answer
Mhm.
to like, what does the blog template
Sure.
look like? But I know we've all seen it before. Oftentimes it's that like big, atrocious colored banner. It's confusing about where you are. There's
Mhm.
like, maybe there's like a product navigation that
Mhm.
hasn't been replaced with a content kind of welcome, if you will. And so the
Mhm.
first reaction someone has is, oh, is this product marketing or is this going to be a reading,
Hmm.
content experience? The other thing we might see is just, a headline that's hard to read, or
Mhm.
a weird pattern as a wrapper around the whole blog. And then something else that really makes a big difference is, have you taken steps to break up that wall of text? So,
Mhm.
a common behavior that people have, especially online, and especially when they come to a piece of content from, say, Google or from social, is you scroll a little bit to see what's there, and then you
Mhm.
go back to the top and decide whether or not you're going to read. And so, do you have subheads? Just things that are gonna, just like little headlines along the way that tell you what a section is about and break up the copy. Do you have graphics or images or things inside the body copy itself that break up the experience, and so it feels more digestible and consumable to a reader? Those are all techniques that we have seen actively increase engagement.
That's so, so helpful, and I think that this is something that, everyone listening in, this is a great simple exercise to do, going back through your website, is to ask those questions, especially things like your blog, your news section on this. When you think about all of this, a huge element of your expertise, and I think a huge element of success here, is storytelling, right? Being able
Mhm.
to tell a good story. I love your background as a journalist in this. It's really fascinating. In terms of, I wish there were more journalists that were getting into marketing, and I'd love to, in fact, all the time I recommend, if someone asks what I should study in school, I think journalism is a great way, because you get the facts, right? You tell the story. In your opinion, and from your perspective, what are the elements of good storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I appreciate it. And I'll just back up a little bit. And back when I was in a newsroom, the question that I had editors ask me all the time is, why does anybody care?
Mm,
And it's simultaneously a simple, obvious question, and it's sometimes so maddeningly hard to be able to
mhm,
answer. And both as a reporter and even now, it's you have to justify what you're writing about, what you're talking about, not because you find it interesting or not because it helps the business that you're trying to help, but because you're required to have empathy, put yourself in the shoes of the person who you're trying to reach, and
mhm.
anchor the thing that you're about to create through the value that you're providing to them. And I think if I was going to say one thing, again, an actionable piece of advice that people who are making content at companies could do, could borrow from a newsroom, is adopt that mindset. When I was a reporter, I had, I was I was covering tech, the tech industry for the Wall Street Journal.
Awesome.
And as you might imagine, it was just a parade of, executives from tech companies coming in to tell us about why they were so great. And, and I had this feeling all the time. I was just like, nobody cares. I didn't say this out loud, but
Right.
I just kept thinking to myself, like, you're talking about how great you are, but most of my readers haven't heard of you. They don't know who you are, or they don't necessarily need a widget right now.
Mhm.
What's a broader, oh, apologies.
No worries.
Um,
By the way,
the
apologies
Yeah.
to anybody out there who actually sells widgets. We've really been dogging the widget industry, but if you manufacture widgets, this really can apply to you.
Yeah, and we love widgets. Widgets are awesome. They just, I don't know, it's a great, I appreciate the note.
No, it's good. We have to put that disclaimer in there, because we just don't want to upset any listeners that are in the widget
Yeah.
industry. It's a very
Widget
vibrant
Twitter
industry.
is a very
They're having
rough
all kinds of
place.
supply chain issues right now and everything, so they're a little sensitive.
No, I mean, I was just gonna say, I would always sort of, if I was offering any coaching, it was going to be this question of like, well, you know, can you talk about how you fit into a broader trend in society? Can you talk
Hmm.
about how you fit into a problem that people are experiencing in a way that's not Deus ex product, but your customers, your potential customers, think about their lives in a much broader purview. I'm struggling to run a small business,
Hmm.
and I'm struggling with my accounting. Now, better financial software is a portion of the solution, but it's not the way that I'm thinking about or experiencing the problem.
Hmm.
Can you have empathy for the way the person you're trying to reach is experiencing the problem, and then give them, like, again, we've also, when we talk to people about what they want from content, how do people like me solve a problem I can relate to? It's sort of like the number one thing that we hear people say. Or can I have data that can help me make better decisions, is the number two thing that we hear people say.
Hmm.
And those are both easy ways to put yourself into that empathy seat. Um, now, I will find that when I made the transition from journalism to marketer, I began to really appreciate, in a way that I didn't as a reporter, all of the rigor that goes into a well-crafted marketing message.
Hmm.
But if what we're trying to do is get and sustain people's attention, it's still advertising if all you're doing is going out with your message. You still
Right.
have to run your message to that filter of what is the thing that people are talking about, what are they caring about, what are the things that they're experiencing in life on a day-to-day basis. And it's only through that alchemy that I think you can come up with a piece of content that's really going to engage people.
I like that. So let's experiment with that live. Folks, here live on the Revenue Growth Podcast, we're going to experiment with the storytelling message. And I like the idea of the accounting software, right? Because there's a lot of
Yeah.
business owners and entrepreneurs on here. So let's say I am selling accounting software for small businesses. And I believe that I have the greatest accounting software that's ever existed. And it's won the awards for the best accounting
Mhm.
software out there, and it's incredible software. How would you begin to craft a story that, because I mean, really, let's be honest, who cares about accounting software? So how would you craft a story to the target market of small business owners, let's say? Like, how would you weave together current trends and challenges that a small business owner is facing right now to tell a compelling story? Totally putting you on
Yeah.
the spot.
No, it's totally
So we
fine.
have some
And
fun with
and
this.
there's and of course there's a lot of other questions, and maybe
Yeah.
let's just play around and experiment
Okay.
a
Yeah.
little bit.
Let's we're just
But
we're just
yeah,
riffing here, folks. This is not
yeah.
pre-planned. And
Uh,
once again, if you're in the widgets thing, just insert widget for accounting software. So
yeah, or maybe we're a hypothetical widget business that's having a hard time with our accounting. What with all the supply chain
there
confusion?
you go. See, we've now the
Yeah,
story is including everybody. I love
yeah.
this. So how do you approach this? What's it, let us inside the mind of Ben Worthen.
Yeah, the initial exercise is a little bit of a multi-pronged one. So first of all, we would start as Message Lab coming in and saying like, well, what are our goals? What are we trying to accomplish with
Right.
content? Because there's a lot of real things that you can do. On one hand,
Hmm.
you may just be wanting to, raise some awareness or reach a new set of people, get them into your ecosystem,
Yeah.
for the first time. Another thing is also just making sure you're crystal clear about who your audience is. If
Hmm.
in this example we're talking to a small business owner, that's great. But we have other clients where the people who use their product aren't necessarily the same people that are going to write the check for the product. And if that's the
Right.
case, you have to decide who do you want to reach, and the things that they're going to care about are different. So you have to sort of settle on those types of questions initially. But let's say we're going to talk to small business owners, and we want to reach people, when they're at a moment of having questions around finances, accounting, and that aspect of a business. The first thing we would do is we would sort of define the world of content, and it's more broadly than the world of what a product is. And the exercise that we find helpful sometimes is to think about, like, what is the idea? What's the big idea? If we're going to have an idea store that
Hmm.
was parallel to a product store, what would we stock the shelves with? Like, what are the big ideas? And oftentimes it's like, what are the challenges that our person is struggling with today that, in parentheses, our product may be able to help with? And what could the world be like in a world where everybody used our product to its fullest potential? And so you have the sort of the dual prong of the challenges and the problems that they're dealing with now, combined with the promise and opportunity, the aspirational part that they can achieve later on. Now, each of those would be a sort of a swim lane, if you will, for the kind of content that you could create. Then you got to figure out what kind of job do you want each piece of content to have? And as an example, something that is optimized for SEO is going to, is a moment in time someone's going to find it, and it's going to be a particular kind of content. We've all seen it. It's these, answers to questions that people have. It's not necessarily based on Daryl's experience or Ben's experience. It's not really a lot of narrative, but it's like well organized at its best, well organized, concise answers to frequently asked questions. So that's one kind of content. And if your strategy is to, try to reach small business owners who are, typing into Google, this is probably a pretty good strategy, by the way. Their financial problems. That's one way to do it. But that kind of content doesn't tend to be very inspiring. It's not going to do well on social, as an example. Very few people are gonna, click on, read how Daryl the widget maker, turned his, basement-based widget company into a $1 billion empire. That's more inspiring, right?
Yes.
And that's going to get people from a different avenue, but people aren't necessarily searching for it, so you're not going to get traffic from that way. So realistically, you probably want to think about, okay, how do we have some content that's going to be for search, some content that's going to be maybe not social, but email, something where we're trying to inspire people, right, to click, and fill both of those buckets. And then to go back to, that sort of empathy point, if we're trying to sell accounting software, I think it's beginning to think more broadly about the problems that we're helping people with. The problem as you experience it is, the tax code changed, and I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to treat this thing for my business, right? And you get a nice little cheeky headline of like 10 tax code changes for 2022 that every small business owner should know,
right?
That type of thing. Or how, or that profile story, how getting better visibility into, accounts receivable and cash management helped Daryl build $1 billion widget empire, and that's bringing someone's lived experience, and what they did and how something helped them. So, again, we could sit here and we could real time 30 different ideas for what to do, but they're all in that same, coming from those same places.
There's so many good ideas in that last segment. I mean, this is kind of one that I think a lot of people are going to want to rewind and go back and really take some notes on. But I think one of the things that was really interesting to me is that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to is what's the purpose of that content? That SEO content is not the content that's going to necessarily generate interest, human interest, right? In social or in email. And looking at there does need to be some, to quote Marcus Sheridan, some they ask, you answer type content for sure. There also needs to be some content that is more inspirational, aspirational, but all of it anchored around questions and problems and issues. And don't there are plenty of questions, problems, and issues right now in this shifting world that we're in. So this is a content writer's opportunity, dream in a lot of ways, because I think a lot of companies, as we're wrapping up, I think this is a time where a lot of companies should be rethinking their content because the environment's changed, the outcomes buyers want are shifting. What are your thoughts in terms of what companies should be thinking right now in the middle of this dynamic environment when it comes to content?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what you just mentioned. People have more things they could choose to pay attention to than ever before. And we have more ways of accessing it. We all have distraction devices in our pocket.
True.
And in the moment something isn't interesting, the moment something feels off, there's something else to pay attention
Right.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we think we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard if we're going to be in the attention business, and we believe strongly that that's the first step towards nurturing someone to the point of being a customer, right? If they become a customer of your idea, to go back to the earlier metaphor,
Mhm.
and then a repeat customer of your ideas, we believe that they're much more likely to eventually become a customer of the product. So,
Love it.
doing making content that's better, making content that you put effort into, not just throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks, but being purposeful and figuring out, what is the job of this piece of content. Those are all things that we think everybody should be asking themselves and looking into in order to get the kind of results that we hope content can generate for us.
I love it. What a great quote. If they become repeat customers of your content, they're much likely to become a customer of your product. That's so beautiful. Ben, thank you for sharing time with us today. Any last words of inspiration as we wrap up?
um, Make good stuff. I
Make
don't know.
good stuff. You heard it here. And we'll put all your contact information in the show notes. You're going to want to connect with Ben and follow him because I have a sense that there's a lot of good content in your future if you do that. Ben, thank you so much for sharing time with us today. This has been
Yeah,
a
of course.
fantastic conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Awesome. And thank you to everybody listening in today and sharing the Revenue Growth Podcast with your peers. We're on a mission right now in 2022 to drive forward, to make this a successful year. Are there challenges? Absolutely. And that's why we've got to dig in and dig deep, work together to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success in the year to come. Thanks again to Selling from the Heart. Make sure to check out the 2022 Authentic Selling Challenge for your sales team at AuthenticSellingChallenge.com. Thank you to everybody who's leaving reviews on your listening platform of choice, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Thanks for subscribing and leaving a review. It helps us spread the message. We've got a good roster of shows lined up here throughout the winter and spring, and I'm so excited about the ideas we're bringing to the table to help you grow. So until next time, let's get going and let's get growing.